Hi everyone, BritSimon here. So one of the biggest, easiest ways to get yourself disqualified during this process is by choosing the wrong country of chargeability. And that term is a confusing term that sometimes people misunderstand and make a genuine mistake about. But the country to which you're charged, or your country of eligibility, for most of you should be very, very simple. But still, every single year, I have to tell people that they are going to be disqualified at their interview because they made a simple, avoidable mistake when they were entering the lottery. In some cases, they have been led to believe that they could try and game the system or get better chances of selection. And because they don't know what they're doing or they were misled, they're going to get disqualified, and it's going to cost them a lot of hassle. So I want you to pay attention to the next few minutes. Just give me a few minutes, and I'm going to focus on this particular topic, okay? We're going to talk about the country of eligibility or chargeability for the DV lottery so that you can choose the correct choice in your entry. Okay, the first concept to understand is that your place of birth is what drives your eligibility to the lottery, nothing else, right? That's the first and most important thing. It is nothing to do with your country of citizenship. It's not to do with your current residence country. It's not to do with, almost nothing else, right? It's to do with the place where you were born. And for the vast majority of people, and I'm talking well over 99% of people, they should simply choose the country of their place of birth as being their country of eligibility or chargeability, right? And so for most people, it'll be very simple. And on the form, there are two questions that relate to this. Actually, let me show you those questions. They firstly ask for the country where you were born. And you must, in all cases, you must choose that correctly, all right? Again, it's where you were born. You were only born in one place. You were born one time in one place. It doesn't matter how many times you've changed countries or perhaps taken on another passport, taken on another nationality or citizenship of some other country. Forget all of that. That has nothing to do with this process. And many people get totally confused about that and lose their opportunity because of that confusion, right? So you were born in one place only. And all you've got to do for the vast majority of you is choose that country, right? Now, there are two valid exceptions to that. Okay, and only two. The first valid exception to that is really when your country of birth is an ineligible country. For example, Cuba this year became ineligible, or Nigeria is ineligible. China is ineligible, right? So if you're born in some of those countries which are ineligible for the DV lottery, you may have a way of entering the lottery still, depending on your situation. And like I said, there are basically two ways. The first way is through parentage, through your parents' country of birth, if you can prove that your parents were in your country of birth temporarily at the time of your birth. So how does that work? Let's say you are from Morocco, and you were born in Nigeria, but you, to all intents and purposes, you're from Morocco. Your parents are Moroccan. Both your parents are Moroccan, or perhaps they're one's Moroccan, one's Algerian, or something like that. But for whatever reason, at the time of your birth, your parents were in the country of Nigeria. And so as far as the US government is concerned, your country of birth, which drives eligibility to the DV lottery, is Nigeria, okay? Nigeria is ineligible, and so you would not be able to enter the lottery unless you can prove that your parents were only in Nigeria for a temporary period of time. Typically that happens because a company that they are working for send them to that location. Perhaps they work for a church Perhaps they work for some multinational, international company, and that company asked them to go to Nigeria and work in Nigeria for a year or two. And during that year or two, you were born, okay? So in that circumstance, you can prove that you were only born in Nigeria because your parents were there temporarily. And the sort of proof that you're going to be expected to provide is that your stay was temporary. You probably weren't brought up in Nigeria. Your parents could show some sort of contract of employment or letters that showed why they had to be in Nigeria. Perhaps there's an affidavit that they could write. There are various ways to prove, usually by coordination with your parents, that you can prove that you were only in Nigeria for a temporary reason. Now, in order to claim that exception, it's called the missionary exception. In order to claim that exception, neither one of your parents must have been born in Nigeria. That's very important. Let's say your father is Moroccan, but your mother is Nigerian, and you were born in Nigeria, then you can't use that exception because you are essentially Nigerian, born to a Nigerian parent who just happens to be married to a Moroccan, right? And so in that circumstance, you can't use the missionary exception. So that's fairly simple. And I would say to you this, I would prefer people only use the missionary exception if their own country of birth is ineligible. I don't think you should generally use that that exception, that get around, unless that's truly the case, that your country of birth is ineligible and you have no other choice but to use your parents' country of birth. Okay, so that's the first one. The second one would be, let me just switch back to full screen. The second way that you may be able to get an exception is through marriage. Let's just be clear, though. This is marriage to your spouse before the DV Entry Act and at the time of the DV entry. So, if you are married to a spouse from a different country, whether your country is eligible or not, you can cross-charge to your spouse's country of birth. Now, in general, it makes no sense whatsoever to do that for all the regions, with the exception of Oceania. So if you were born in Europe or Asia or Africa or wherever else, but your spouse was born in Oceania, then you can charge to your spouse's country of birth, right? Assuming their country of birth is eligible. Why would you do that for Oceania in particular? Well, because the chance of selection for Oceania is around about 5 times higher than any other region. Even though there are very few winners from Oceania, the chance of selection, the percentage chance that you will be selected each year is about 5 times greater. And so if you are in that situation where your spouse is from the Oceania region, definitely use that. You can charge to their country of birth. When you do that, though, both of you will be treated as a principal applicant. And you would have to enter the USA together on that very first entry. You have to enter the USA together. After that point, your status is your own status. Let me just show you, though, how you would do both of those exceptions, right? So how you would do it on the entry form is you would pick your country of birth. Let's say, what did I say? I said you were born in Nigeria for the other one. We're gonna say you're born in Nigeria. Where's Nigeria? Nigeria. Okay. Your country where you were born, and then it says here the country of eligibility for the DV program. So whether you're using the country of your parents or the country of your spouse, either way, you would say you would answer this question: are you claiming eligibility based on the country where you were born? For most of you, you're going to say yes, right? And then you can see that option grays out. You can't any longer choose a value from that drop-down list. But if you click no, that means you're not claiming to be eligible for the lottery through your country of birth. And that means that you can then choose the other country that is involved here. Let's say Australia. So this is a person born in Nigeria who happens to be married to a spouse from Australia, right? And in that way, that person would be given, would be moved to the lottery for the Oceania region, okay? And have a 5 times greater chance of selection. So now, by all means do that if that's true, right? But do not, under any circumstances whatsoever, do not lie at this point of the process. I've dealt with at least one person this year who thinks I'm an idiot, who told me that they were from, where were they from? They were from Kenya, I think, and this guy, something like 35 years old, says he was born in Australia, but then when he was 1, he moved back to Kenya, I think it was, or one of the African countries, and that sounds sort of somewhat plausible. And then he grew up in Kenya, but we're talking about an African that was born in Australia. And then he said, "Oh, my wife is the same. She was also born to Kenyan parents, has lived all of her life in Kenya, but was born to Kenyan parents in Australia." And I'm like, okay, you must think I'm an idiot. And you know, for those of you that think it's a good idea to make up silly stories, please don't do that, because it will result in you getting disqualified. So let me talk about the disqualification. Basically, the rules are this: if you claim to be eligible to a country in a different region, and it is then found that you have no right to claim that eligibility, so your parents, you know, you can't use the parent exception, the missionary exception, and you can't charge to your spouse's country of birth because they actually weren't in that other country. If you can't prove those exceptions and you're therefore in the wrong region, you will 100% of the time be disqualified, 100% of the time. Okay, there's no way to fix it. If you are in the wrong region, because actually what happens is each of the regions, Africa, Europe, Asia, and so on, they are in totally different lotteries. All of the entries come in and they're separated by region. And so the draw process for Oceania is a completely different draw process than that of Europe or of Africa and so on. Each of those regions are totally separate. So if you're in the wrong region because you chose the wrong country, either by mistake or because you were trying to leverage one of the exceptions, but you're not really eligible to use one of those exceptions, if you're in the wrong region, you will be disqualified. There is absolutely no doubt about it. And there's no fix for it. Now, on the other hand, if you if you claim to be born in, let's say, France, and you are actually born in Germany, both those countries are within the same region, and that mistake, for whatever reason you made it, that mistake will be forgiven. Okay, if the two countries involved are in the same region, and you did not gain any advantage through that mistake, then your choice and your mistake will be forgiven. Where this can go wrong for people is if somebody realizes that their chance of selection in their own country within the region is lower, and they choose to pretend they're in some other region in the country. So, some other country in the region. So, for example, let's say an Iranian or a Nepalese applicant chooses to say they're in one of the other Asian countries, and they're from one of the other Asian countries. That choice would not be forgiven. That will result in disqualification. Why? Because both Nepal and Iran are both restricted during the draw process, meaning the chance of selection from those two countries is actually lower than other countries within that same region of Asia. Okay? And so by moving the choice of country to another country within the region, number one, they've lied, but number two, they have gained an advantage through that lie or through that mistake. Okay? And so, you mustn't think you can game the system that way. It won't work. So going back to the very basics, for almost all of you, you should be choosing in question number 5. You should be choosing your country of birth, and in question number 6, you should be selecting the option yes, meaning you don't want to pick another country in question 6. There's no need to pick another country, right? It's not to do with your place of residence. It's not to do with your nationalities or your current citizenships or passports. Nothing to do with any of that. It is purely to do with your country of birth, okay? And you've only got one country of birth. And you always will ever have only one country of birth, okay? So please do pay attention to what I've been saying in this video. It's extremely important. Every single year I've been doing this, and I think I'm now in my 12th year of helping people through this process, maybe 13th year. In every year, I've had people who have lost their chance for this exact reason, because they make a mistake or they think they can be smart at the DV entry period, and it goes horribly wrong later. And also, it's particularly bad because this mistake won't be picked up in any background check. You will be disqualified only at the interview. KCC will screen the case. They will process the DS-260. They will set up an interview for you. You'll go for the interview. You will have paid for the medical prior to the interview, and you'll pay the fees at the interview for the interview itself, $330 for each person. And then more or less immediately, you're going to be disqualified in that interview. You will be told directly in that interview that you're being disqualified. And so they would have taken the money from you, and you'll have paid for the interview fees and for the medical fees. And then they will literally within 5 minutes, you'll be told you're being disqualified, because they know exactly what's going on. They know that you don't have the documentation that proves you were born where you said you were born, etc. And you will be disqualified straight away, because it's very simple for them to find this mistake. It's very, very obvious to them when you've made this mistake. So please don't do that to yourself. It's just a stupid thing to do. Don't do it, okay? All right, everybody. So DV 2026 entry period is here. Please do watch my videos on how to enter DV 2026. They will be linked in a special playlist at the end of this video, and you'll see that in a few moments on screen. But also, please make sure you're subscribed to my channel. I have been doing this, as I mentioned, probably 13 years now. I often say 12 years, but I think it's probably in my 13th year. I've been helping people all of that time. I've seen pretty much every single question has been asked. Every single question has been answered. I've seen it all. And I help people for free. I don't charge any money for the services and the advice that I provide. Honestly, you have no reason to be paying other people to help you with anything. I can answer every question that you have, okay? All right, everybody. Thanks for listening today. Bye now.